Hey everyone, so I've been at a bit of a loose end with this channel. For the past month or so, I've been working on one of my first collaboration videos, one that should hopefully already be out, but as of writing this, isn't ready. And so I've had to make a few in between, all culminating in this, where I've had little time to plan but still want to get something out. So, I decided to treat myself with a video all about one of the most underrated games of all time, of course being I Expect You to Die, The Spy and the Liar. The I Expect You to Die series is a collection of VR puzzle games. You play as an agent nicknamed Agent Phoenix who works for the agency. Your company works tirelessly to stop the evil forces of Zor and their organization Zoraxis. The people in this game are pretty bad at creative writing. The first game, I Expect You to Die, works mostly as an anthology. There are 7 levels, all disconnected until the last 2, both of which involve stopping a space laser. The second, Spy and the Liar, has more of an overarching story, as you investigate many Zoraxis staff members, gradually unraveling a plot about taking over all of the world's nukes. The third also has an overarching story, but adds on to the pre-established lore of our main character. I think all of these are great games and I could easily recommend all of them. Although, if I had to give excuses as to why I'm only talking about number 2 and not 1 or 3, I'd say that 1 is usually fantastic but has a few pretty bad levels, and 3 is great in every aspect except for the story, which is really lackluster. Meanwhile, I Expect You to Die 2 is one of the 7 games that I would give a full 10 out of 10. Another one of them is the Stanley Parable, as you may know, another is Undertale, and I'll eventually get to videos on the other 4. It took me a while to actually give this one a 10. I kind of considered it a fair bit in my head, thinking about if I would actually do it. Eventually, however, the thing that tipped the scale was the realization that there was not a single aspect of this game that I disliked. All of it just worked seamlessly. The closest I had to a negative aspect was how short it was. It only has 6 levels, and each one took me maybe a little over an hour on first playthrough. The story and character development didn't feel rushed or anything, I just wanted to get even more of this game, which is one of the best criticisms to get. So let's talk about it. This video is probably going to be not all too analytical and more just talking about fun stuff, so if you disagree with my opinions, please let those emotions fester over time until it turns into a violent rage which consumes you, at which point you will have finished your villain arc and we can figure things from there. So, lower the banners, raise the clock, and let's get straight into it. Before getting into why I think everything about this is a perfect game, I want to get into why I think this is a perfect VR game. Because if you're spending a couple $100s on a headset to play video games, you'd want to get some pretty unique ones. A couple of examples of games that are absolutely better for being in VR would be Beat Saber or The Climb. Half of the fun of climbing a mountain is actually reaching for the rock and being able to not just see, but feel the drop below you, and the versatility of VR allows for some incredibly satisfying tech in Beat Saber. A game that probably isn't all that improved by being in VR would be something like Red Matter. Don't get me wrong, I was much more immersed because of how I was actually there, and it made finding clues feel better, but the game could have easily just been played on PC or console without losing any gameplay or visuals. So, why does Spy and the Liar fit into the former? Well, a couple of reasons. Number 1, and most importantly, environment. Most of the locations that you're sent to not only become more immersive in VR, but are just cooler to be in. Level 3, good example. In Eavesdrop, you infiltrate the Fabricator's office, unlocking the locks in our desks and trying not to trip any of the wires. On PC, this section would be interesting, but because of how quiet it is, it wouldn't be all that engaging. However, actually being the one to look around the room, pull open the drawers, and get into the moment of jeopardy with the guard makes an otherwise boring hour turn into something actually pretty intense. It's cool being the one to actually fix the weapons on a plane wing, actually use a harpoon gun to shoot some Zoraxis operatives, or go up the elevator to foil Zoraxis' evil plans. In terms of the locations actually being interesting, I'll be frank, the first game was better in this regard. I mean, we just have a plain backstage and a basement. There isn't much that is cooler to experience in VR than just standard gaming. Is what I would say if not for the elusive Level 5. Level 5, safe and sound, starts by the agent being knocked unconscious by some dangerous gases. They then wake up back at agency headquarters. However, something is off. Some chicanery afoot, some skullduggery simmering. So after digging around the room, you find a camera pointed at you. Then, your handler's voice starts to become staticky and is replaced by John Juniper, the main antagonist. Because, as it turns out, you weren't at the agency, you are actually in a film set constructed by Zoraxis. This film set then deconstructs around you, a laser contraption is activated above your head, and you're revealed to be in an abandoned warehouse as John Juniper begins a villain monologue. Do you not want to play this game immediately? Like, that one moment is so insanely well done and cool that I will boot up the game, select this level, and complete the first half of it just to get to this animation, and it's freaking worth it every time. Next on the list is obstacles. There are a lot of classic, life-threatening obstacles in every single level in this game, and they feel much better to get through when you actually have to move your head. Level 4, you're in the basement, safe from almost all confrontations. However, after doing some digging around, you need to enter a passcode on the wall. If you get this passcode wrong, a giant axe will swing from the ceiling and you need to move out of the way in order to not die. Or what about level 2, a plane? When the security protocols begin to malfunction, lasers start shooting out from the seats and walls. It feels way better using the materials you have at your disposal to deactivate the machinery when you actually get to look around in a panic figuring out what to do. The freedom you get with not only fully realized objects that act as they would in the real world, but also the ability to actually move them around is something exclusive to VR, and Spine the Lie's system of putting you through quick thinking scenarios where you have to interact with this world makes you feel like you can't really get the same experience anywhere else. So that's why I think this is a great VR game. Now on to why I think it's perfect in general. The gameplay in this game is great not because of each individual level, but because of the game as a whole. Once again, this is a puzzle game, so actual gameplay is going to be limited. So when I refer to gameplay, I'm more referring to the style of what you're doing. It'll make more sense as I go on. There are a fair few directions to go in for a VR spy game, and Spine the Lie decide to go in all of them, and do them well of course, that's important too. Level 1 starts with you going backstage in a theatre show. The gameplay here is mostly focused on collecting clues and blending in, a good, simple way to start off the game. Level 2, that plane one. Once you uncover the fact that your pilot is actually a Zaraxis operative through similar clues to the first level, you have to very quickly complete a lot of simple tasks in order to stop the plane being blown up. This gameplay shifts course into being something actually a little easier, but even more action-packed. Then we come to level 3, all about the clues. There's a little thing with the guard, but this is mostly focused on using all of the information at your disposal to make educated guesses about where to go next. Then we get to 4, which is kind of a mix between all of the 3 previous ones. There's a bit of blending in with the Zaraxis party, finding clues about passcodes and Zaraxis plans, all ending with a high-energy confrontation involving poison gas, harpoons, and hand grenades. This game is freaking awesome! Then we move on to level 5, which is intended to be more cinematic. There aren't actually a lot of steps in beating the level, because most of it is the whole film set thing, an epic monologue, a laser gun, and motion tracking missiles. Epic stuff! Finally, level 6 is all about using what you have to your advantage. It's all about finding power boxes, screwdrivers, keys, control panels, and spray bottles, then using them in the best possible ways. It also has a couple of exciting and cinematic elements. When the original theme kicks in here, I get chills every time. So the game has plenty of variety. That's a good start, but are the puzzles satisfying? I can tell you there are few things worse than puzzle games that have really dumb solutions. There's murder, torture, then there's unfun puzzle games, and then maybe assault after that. So that means you'll be thrilled to hear that there is none of that at all. Well, I mean, if I had to pick a sore thumb, it'd be level 5. Some of the leaps in logic are a little too large, and I think I had to pull up a walkthrough, but it makes sense once you get the solution. But ignoring that, everything else works well. Everything is either hinted at through some kind of diary entry or diagram, and everything else just makes logical sense. My personal favourite puzzles would have to be using the elevator to lure operatives into rooms, and using the mimic mask and voice lines to hide from a guard. This game doesn't have any really mind-breaking gimmicks, but it does practically everything that it needs to right. Speaking of doing practically everything that it needs to right, I don't have a whole lot to say about the story on its own, because like most action flicks, the story can be pretty easily replaced. However, what we do get is something that manages to be fun for the majority of the game, but can take itself seriously when it needs to. So, here it is. In this game, Zaraxis' plans are to create a mimic mask which will be used to mimic the heads of state, gaining access to all of the country's nuclear codes. The main people working for this are Dr. Zor, obviously, the Fabricator, who's actually making the mask, and John Juniper, who's using the mask to impersonate the state heads. John Juniper is actually quite a famous actor, who you're introduced to in the first level. In Stage Fright, you foil the Fabricator's plans to poison an entire audience, including a Prime Minister. Then, in level 2, you get to John Juniper's private jet for some information, quickly realizing he also works for Zor. In level 3, you sneak into the Fabricator's lab, and this is where you learn about and put a tracking device in the mimic mask. In level 4, you follow the mask's location to a party hosted by John Juniper and gain access to the briefcase. In level 5, John Juniper kidnaps you and starts finalizing his plan. Once you're rescued by your handler, you start level 6 and are taken to Zaraxis Defense headquarters, and you foil their plans. The story is really well paced, and since there are reveals at the end of every level, consistently engaging. Uncovering more and more about not just Zaraxis' bigger scheme, but also the individuals who work for it was super cool and made the whole thing feel more real. The plotline is also right on the border between so silly it's completely unbelievable and a viable threat which is perfect for a James Bond parody. Not once was I bored about what was happening, nor was I particularly getting lost, which can really easily happen in something as interactive as a video game. I was pleasantly letting the plot of this game wash over me for the majority of this game, up until the ending where stuff got hit into insanely high gear. Once you get the elevator to work at Zarax's headquarters, you're brought up to a stage where John Juniper is delivering a speech about how he now has all of the nuclear codes. Once he notices you, he starts confidently shooting at you, not realizing that you can just get rid of the catwalk. Once you do this, he falls, and in a desperate attempt to escape, offers to tell you the identity of Dr. Zor. As soon as he says this, however...
I can tell you who Dr. Zor is!
No, Mr. Juniper. I don't think so.
Holy crap, is that Dr. Zor?
Ha! What are you gonna do about it? There's nobody left in this building to stop me. I'm still running the show.
Mr. Juniper, you were never running the show. Fabricator, if you would.
Bye-bye, John.
What? Wait! Doctor,
Holy crap, it's actually happening! From here, you collect the briefcase, which has some simple puzzles to disarm the nukes. Once you complete them, it's revealed that it doesn't have enough power to actually complete the command, and the only thing you have to give it power is what's currently powering the elevator. Redirect it, and you'll fall to your death. So, in an incredible sacrifice, you revert the power to the briefcase, disarming the nukes. However, before you fall, with the music swelling in the background, Zor says this.
I see. If you survive this, Agent, I shall be in touch.
Agent!
Holy crap, that was completely freaking awesome. Like, I would discuss it more now, but what is there to discuss? If that wasn't the hypest thing that you've heard in your life, then you're just the fun police and you're not allowed to watch this video anymore. I genuinely can't get enough of this ending. It perfectly develops tension, darkens the tone both effectively and quickly, has a huge lore drop, makes action movie cliches feel unimaginably amazing, has sick vocal design for Dr. Zor, a beautiful orchestral soundtrack playing in the background, and some genuinely emotional core with the handler realizing that you'll fall to your death. Like, what? I got this game because it looked fun. Why am I getting some of the best storytelling in gaming from this? Scratch beforehand when I said I don't have a lot to say about the story in this game. I had a whole lot to say. But I think I'm done now, which means I get to talk about half of the reason I like this game in the first place.
John Juniper here.
I think this narcissistic actor might actually be my favorite character in gaming. He's voiced by Will Wheaton, and he nails every single line. I've always been a bit of a fan of his work, but this game really cemented him to me as a top-tier actor. Every line is not only well acted, but also just really fun to listen to. I specifically love this one from level 4.
Agent's right there! Are you wearing one of my masks?
Honestly, the acting probably makes up most of the character for me, and it's pretty clear that Wheaton is incredibly comfortable in such a fun role as this. There's also how he works as a villain. While Dr. Zor is the main villain of the series, and the Fabricator is definitely worse than him, I'd still very easily say that John is the main villain of this game. He shows up the most, has the most personal stakes with you, and is the spokesperson for all of Zor's plans. And he works super well as this because there's no grey areas in his character. I won't hark on this too much because there's another video in it, but the main reason I disliked I Expect You to Die 3's story as much as I did was because they tried to make the villain sympathetic. Roxana was pretty good, but as soon as they try to give her a low-effort character arc where she realizes robots aren't as good as people, she just becomes that low-effort trope. Meanwhile, John Juniper leans so far into being evil that he comes out the other side as a consistently interesting character. John has absolutely no motivation for doing what he does. He is simply a charismatic villain who wants as much power as possible through whatever means he can. He has a complete disregard for anyone and everyone else. He impersonates your handler, he sacrifices those who work for him. He doesn't pay any respect or attention to the Fabricator, he almost gives away Dr. Zor's identity. He only thinks about himself, and that's so entertaining. The other part of him that works really well is his mask. No, not the real one, the metaphorical one. In level 2, it's slowly revealed to you that John Juniper is working for Dr. Zor. He starts out being incredibly likable and accommodating, but the more you learn, the more that starts to slip, and the more evil he lets himself be. This sentiment is present in many levels. At his party, he starts out as a great host would, but as you go on, he gets angrier and angrier, and he gets more and more careless with his staff. At Zarax's defense, he starts out completely confident, then gets more and more desperate. Now, I'm not saying that this is a really creative or well done character technique, but I am saying that it adds variety and intrigue to his character because both sides of his personality are entertaining. When he's being likable, he's obviously great to be around, and when he's gone villain mode, he's an irredeemable monster who deserves no sympathy. They managed to make a character who can change faces constantly and make all of them fun because his core is so cheesily evil. I can't get over how much of this character shouldn't have really done anything for me, and yet he's one of my favourite characters in anything ever. Okay, so before moving on to a conclusion for this brain vomit, I wanted to add in some miscellaneous notes. Number 1, and most importantly, the intro sequence. This is present in all I Expect You to Die games, but the intro is so incredibly good. Like, look at these giant masks that turn to face you and beat with the music. Or what about this part where they put John Juniper in the James Bond intro and he shoots you? What about the music? I need you to do yourself a favor. Search up Spine the Liar intro music and click on the first result. Your life will change forever. So much unprecedented effort went into a 3-minute section of the game, and without it, these games wouldn't have nearly as much identity as they do now. Of the 3, I think this is probably my favourite. The mixture of the music and visuals that aren't too aggressively detailed makes this a feast to experience. Next, the handler is great here. In the first, he is a bit too reserved to be a compelling character, and in the third, they play him for dumb laughs a bit too much for my taste. This one strikes a perfect middle, where he's both a funny guy, but can also be a great way to convey the story. I also think his voice actor, Jared Mason, has an immaculate voice.
I know this van isn't as luxurious as your old office, but we can't let Zaraxus know you survived your last mission.
Another is the soundtrack in general. It doesn't do anything out of this world, except for the intro song, but I'd absolutely use it for background music when writing. The only reason I don't is that in the official version, some of the lines are linked with the music, so that puts a bit of a damper on the relaxation I had in mind. But in-game, the music is great. Have a listen when you get the chance. They have this line in level 5.
I don't expect you to understand. I expect you to... well, frankly, I expect you to find a way out.
Which feels like listening to a piano song and missing the last note. Finally, Agent Phoenix is the sickest name that I've heard in my life. I'd make my friends call me that, but I don't think they'd agree with how cool it is. Feel free to refer to me as Agent Phoenix in the comments. It won't do anything, but I will feel good reading it. And I think that's about all I've got to say. I'm glad to finally get a video out on this completely unexpected masterpiece, and I've been wanting to for a while. I do have a fair bit less to say about the other 2, but I could see myself eventually making a video about them, or about number 4, which I'm pretty excited for. So, thanks for tuning in. This video was pretty easy to script. It's great to talk about something that you like, and Spine the Liar is that to a T. And with all of that out of the way, take your bows, drop the curtains, and cue the outro music.